Engagers, this is Professor Game, where we interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking who bring us the best of their experiences to get ideas, insights, and inspiration to help us in the process of using games and gamification in our daily lives, for example, to learn what we are teaching. And I am Rob Alvarez. I work at Ironhack, teach at IE Business School University, and so much more, and host this podcast. If you have an extra second, please go ahead and subscribe for free to our email list at professorgame.com/subscribe. Engagers, welcome back to another episode of the Professor Game podcast. And we have a repeat guest, my dear friend, Zac Fitz-Walter. Welcome back, Zac.
Thanks, Rob. It's great to be back.
As you know, and we were making the numbers out before we started the recording, and it's been 5 years. It's literally been 5 years since we last spoke. Back in the day over Skype. Now we're using another tool, Zencaster. But 5 years, that's quite a while. And since it's been a while, I'll quickly go through his intro once again, because Zac Fitz-Walter is a lecturer, trainer, and games master, sought out for his expertise in gamification and behavior design. And he earned one of the world's first PhDs in gamification design and has since lectured and developed curricula on the gamification for universities. And he works with individuals, governments, and companies around the world, teaching them how to effectively use game design, gamification, and behavior design to improve services, products, and teaching. And he is obsessed, of course, with the power of play. He believes play is a universal activity that can connect us, teach us, and move us, and inspire us to do great things. So, Zac, I hope I didn't leave anything outside of that intro.
No, I think that covers it, except for one more thing, and that's I'm a huge board game nerd as well. But otherwise, incredible. Thank you for the intro.
Fantastic. So, Zac, we were, looking into seeing what this conversation would be about, and you mentioned that you have two sort of main areas of interest right now. Do you care to repeat those?
Yeah, sure. Well, I guess I'll quickly give you an intro in terms of like what I do on a regular basis. So, I guess I spend half of my time as a university lecturer teaching games design at Griffith University here in Brisbane, Australia. So I'm located in the Southern Hemisphere. I just love teaching, like you, Rob. And game design is just a really fun course to teach. And it's inspiring to see all the new and interesting games the students are coming up with. But the other half of my time, like you said in the intros, I spend working in industry. So running, behavior and gamification design workshops for product designers and educators, and building products and talking to interesting people like yourself. But yeah, you're right. So two different domains of work or areas that I work in. The first is kind of the intersection of games, gamification, and behavior design with digital products. So this work kind of focuses on how we can make websites and apps more fun and engaging, especially those centered around building a useful habit, like a new fitness regime or healthy screen time for kids. And that work kind of relates to the PhD I did. But the other area I'm working on, which is relatively new, is the intersection of board games and education. So as I mentioned, I'm a big board games nerd. I love playing board games. But more than that, I think I'm really impressed with the ability for board games to help teach and practice important life skills in a safe learning environment.
Very interesting. But before we get into those, you mentioned that you're teaching game design. The major, is it what's it about, the people who are studying these courses with you?
Yeah, so it's an entire degree that's dedicated to games design. There's a couple of majors. We can focus on, for example, player experience or CGI and art. But yeah, basically you can do this course 3 years as a student at the university here, and learn to become a games designer.
Amazing. So those of you who are interested in that and who might be in the area or willing to move to the area, where you can have some amazing game design experiences, for sure.
Brisbane is a nice place.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, having moved from Latin America, in the tropical area, basically, to Europe, which we've had a fantastic journey, plenty of good things. But right now, for example, it's summer. And it's the hottest summer on record, probably. That having a mild temperature throughout the year is a big perk, especially when you move. So,
yes,
definitely something to look forward to. So Zach, you were mentioning, and I'm gonna stop on this one for a bit because I think it's for the audience and actually for my curiosity as well, on the side of board games and education for two reasons:
Mm,
because education and because board games, right?
yeah.
Why am I saying this? Because typically, for when you talk about gamification and implementing games in your classroom and implementing games in general, people tend to over focus perhaps on video games, right? So and they're amazing. Don't get me wrong. I had I
Mm.
spent recently almost a full day playing video games because I had no time for them in the past few months. But there is a very big, valuable, and valid point for board games and physical games in general as well, especially now we're hopefully coming out of the pandemic, global pandemic. So I wanted to stop there. Like, what are you observing? What's some keys that you've seen, and of course, why have you been going through this new stage on board games?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think board games are super accessible in the sense that they're easy to find, fairly cheap to buy, and you can play them over and over again. They teach great skills as well. The fact that you're all sitting around, usually the board game together in a group, you get to practice things like communication, collaboration, problem solving, negotiating, and of course, my favorite, losing gracefully. And all these kind of these actions or these skills are core to many board games. Not only that, if you go to the website boardgamegeek.com, which is one of my favorite websites because it ranks all the board games out there. Some of them are definitely subjective in terms of the ranking. Well, they're not my favorite, but it's useful to get recommendations for board games. But there are over 130,000 board games out there. So there's so many board games being made. They continue to be designed and released. I think it was like over 4,000 last year in 2021. So there's a huge range of board games. They're super accessible. They bring people together, and they have these great skills that you can practice in a safe environment. Because when you lose a board game or lose at a board game, it's not a big issue.
Never is. For sure. And there's an interesting part of that, and I don't know what your focus is, and that was my next question. Like, are you focusing on sort of using existing board games to sort of support education, or maybe building board games to do specific things? Like, where's your curiosity right now, and what are you focusing on?
Yeah, so it's actually both of those. The workshops we've been running, one day or half a day generally focuses on explaining or showcasing how you can use existing board games, how you can teach them effectively, what kind of questions you can ask learners and students in order to kind of reinforce the learning as well. And then the other half of the workshop is focused on, okay, now we've seen these board games, they exist, but what if there's not a board game that you can find that really suits your learning? Then how can you go about creating it? And so we then spend some time identifying what the educational goal is, prototyping, and then playing a board game that the participants make and getting some feedback. So it's a nice combination of both.
Nice. And they build a single board game together. Is that sort of the format?
Yeah, they usually break up into groups. So small groups, about 3 to 4 people, and then make a board game around a topic or an educational goal that they are currently working on.
Nice. That sounds very interesting. Because that was exactly like my big doubt is always like I have several friends who have been on the board game space for quite a while, and education in particular. And I always find it interesting that for example, like, oh, you're an English teacher, and helping people learn English through board games. It almost sounds like easy because what do you do in board games? You talk, and you just sort of force people, quote unquote, into just speaking English. Then they're kind of practicing and they're negotiating and they're using words for all these things. And there's many that are especially based on words, so you kind of get to that. And there's other ones where oh, you're teaching negotiation, and there's so many instances in board games where you have to negotiate. So there's so many of these. But then you're teaching, I don't know, you're teaching like me, like supply chain or operations.
Mm-hmm.
How do you get how do you extract, or how do you find a board game that suits that? And as you were saying, the alternative is you don't find it, and you build your own. And that is a thing that I think is growing in many ways. There's always a worry, however, of course, as with any physical artifact, that it's not scalable. But I
Mm.
don't know if that's a worry. What would you say? Actually, let me pose it as a question. What would you say about this when people say, "Oh, yeah, but board games are not scalable"?
Scalable in the sense that it's hard to do with a large group, or
Yeah, I mean, digital things, you build it and it's there, and you can have it for two people and for 2 million, and it's basically almost the same, right? With a board game,
yeah, okay, yep,
if you have a class of 40, it's hard to get a board game that you play for 40, or you have to break it
yeah,
into groups, so
totally.
you need 4 board games or whatever that looks like.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, exactly. So you can get multiple copies of the board game. Is one way to do it. A lot of board games are also just print and play. So there's some great board games out there. One really fun one is called Fun Employment, and it's all about trying to convince the other players that you're the best candidate for this job, and the jobs are ridiculous. um, but that one you can buy, or you can get a free print and play version online. So in terms of scalability, I guess the nice thing with board games are the components themselves are fairly cheap in the sense that a lot of them use, just paper, or you can be played with just paper. But then also, yeah, you can also get copies, I guess, and the copies, you know, board games, yes, they can get quite expensive, but if you find a way to buy them wholesale, or find a way to get a discount, it can be a bit cheaper.
So and again, I'm just playing the devil's advocate here.
Yeah, of
Don't take
course,
it
that's
as
good.
I don't agree, but so what you're saying is they're worth the quote unquote extra effort in that sense.
Yeah, and I guess you can reuse them over and over again as well, which is nice. But then, yeah, it's interesting. You can adapt them yourself and change the rules as well. And this is the side of board games I really like, is when you start introducing house rules or adapting games to suit your particular context. I guess there's this other great game, this board game, this card game. I guess it's called The Mind. Um, it's a really interesting game. The Mind is for 2 to 4 people, and basically you can't talk during the game, or signal to your friends or anything like that, and you basically have to play cards in ascending order from 1 to 100, but you only get a certain number of cards each round. So I haven't done a very good job at explaining it, but it's really interesting because it's a collaborative game. You can't speak, but we've seen that scaled to it's 2 to 4 players, but you can scale it up and play it with 40 players by just tweaking a few rules.
Interesting. And in that sense, is there, I don't know, are there any particular games that have been calling your attention that you've been using more, or maybe that you use, I don't know, maybe in your workshops? Like, could you name a few examples of things that and what they, again, the main things that you've been seeing that they can help you teach, or I don't know, like especially commercial ones that we can find out there.
Yeah. So look, basically every game has some kind of core skill that needs to be practiced or learnt. The area we've been focusing a lot on recently is collaboration and cooperation and teamwork. And so we've seen a couple of really good games. The Mind is one of them, because you have to kind of come up with a strategy and then put that strategy into play and then practice it. But that's a cheap board game, and it doesn't take too long to learn, and it's not too difficult to play. And then another one is called Forbidden Island, which I love. It's all about going onto an island, finding the treasure, and then escaping the island before it sinks. And this one's an interesting one because it does involve talking, you're collaborating, you're running around the island together. And so you've got to come up with the best strategy. Yeah, so those are kind of the two ones we've been looking at or using recently. But then there are a range of other board games out there. And we've been going through, so this is myself and a colleague of mine, Chi, and just identifying board games and the different skills that they can help and teach, and then sharing these as well on a new website.
Sounds amazing. Can you share the website where you're sharing that?
Yeah, so it's called gameandlearn.substack.com. On there now, we're currently just giving out recommendations every 2 weeks for different games, but then ways in which you can teach it as well, questions you can ask as well to reinforce the learning. And then we've invented our own little achievement sheets for each board game as well. So you can download that in order to then, basically extend the life of the game.
Gameandlearn.substack.com, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, I got it. I'm going to put it on our notes as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob.
because I do think that there's I don't know if you've heard of there's several people in the space sort of recommending things and using stuff for inspiration as well. I do find it's very interesting to have a reference and say, oh, I don't know where to find this. Like, do I have and there's been many efforts going on and different people trying to sort of bring it all together and have this place. And I don't know if that is actually possible to have sort of bring it all together and have all the put possibilities and all that in one single place.
Yeah,
But
of
I
course.
do think there is a lot of value and several people building different ones, because maybe your focus right now, for example, as you were saying, is collaboration. There's other people who are sort of more focused, for example, in skills for I don't know, people in first through third grade, right, at school. And there's other people focusing more on executive education profiles. So people who are, at executive level. And I
Mm.
think, having all of those around makes it good because they're specialized and they should be very good at what they're doing, or they get better, even if they're not great. Once you do it over and over again, you start getting better. And you can have a reference for what you were looking for, which is a lot harder when you have this huge, massive repository where you don't like, which basically is the internet, right?
Yes, that's right.
It's already hard enough to search in the internet. You don't want an internet for just all these things, and there's so much. So
Yeah,
I do think it's very, very interesting. So yeah, um, I think there's many there's a lot of space for these things. It's like, oh yeah, when I started the podcast, like people were saying like, oh yeah, there are a couple of people doing this. Like, yeah, but they're not doing the same. At least I think I will be very consistent, and I can say at least to that one I've stuck to for these few years. And there's sort of always a space for something else. And in podcasting, even, you see like, oh, I have a podcast in business. Well, of course, there's a million podcasts in business, but what is yours about? And there's where it starts getting interesting, because there's nobody with your voice, there's nobody with your focus. And oh no, I have a podcast in gamification. Oh, there's other 5 or 10 of those. Oh yeah, but mine is focused on this and that. So I think there's always space for those things. And there's this, especially more than space, there is value to those things, and there's people who are going to find it very, very valuable. So kudos for that, Zach. That's always bringing value to the world is always important.
Yeah, thanks, Rob.
So let's focus now on your other, sort of focus. I started by this one because I know it's relatively new, and I just wanted to get it out there, and I think it's very, very interesting. But I know you've had plenty of time and space to reflect on your views on games, gamification, and digital software. So what do you want to start on this one?
Ooh, good question. I did see in your questions there's one about your favorite failure, which I thought was always a good start. So we could start
Sure.
there. This was an interesting question, where favorite failure and what about it set me up for learning and future success. So yeah, look, this is one I keep coming back to. But being a designer, I always have different ideas for game-based solutions. So years ago, when I was fresh out of uni and wanting to create some of my first gamified experiences, I got really excited about pedometers and how to make them more engaging than by just having a 10,000 step goal or a leaderboard. And so a few friends and I explored different solutions, and we came up with one that combined a Digimon and a pedometer. Do you remember Digimons at all, Rob?
Yeah, I don't want to speak against anyone, but I always felt that Digimons are like the copy of Pokemons. I don't know if that's accurate, who came first, but that's always how I felt. My wife just mentioned it, I think like 1 or 2 days ago. We saw something on the news or something. It's like, yeah, those are the guys who like almost copied. I don't know, if that's accurate or not, but I feel I've always felt that they sort of came behind, maybe in success for sure, because Pokemon is very well known throughout the world, and Digimon a little less. But so sorry for the Digimon lovers out there.
Oh, Rob, you're killing me. No, that's okay. It's okay. I would say the Digimon is closer to the Tamagotchi. So it's like a virtual pet where you had your own little device, but it was made for boys because Digimon would fight, right? Um, because apparently that's what all the boys want in games. But yeah, look, it was interesting. So we thought we'd combine a Digimon and a pedometer and be like, this is going to be great. And so we got to building it in our spare time over a year or so. So it took us about a year to put together a prototype. And when we finally got to the point where we could get it onto people's phones to play test it, we found out that the game was really boring. We had put too much work into like creating customized step goals didn't prototype or test the game part for a long time. And so when we finally got it into people's hands, it meant we wasted a lot of time building this thing that we ended up scrapping. So yeah, really sad. But we had fun and learnt a lot. But the most important learning was the importance of testing ideas early. And this can be applied to any game-based solution you create. So yeah, this learning has saved us a lot of time since then.
It's fail early, and you went in and you failed early. That's good.
We did.
Early on,
we should have listened to other people's advice, but we learned it the hard way by taking our time.
It was I would say it was a good time for that. You're starting off, and I don't know, you're starting off, and that always gives you sort of more permission to do those kinds of things and to learn from that. And it's always better to do it then and have that failure then than to have it, when you're already 10 years in and you're already, some people feel at least that you're more of an expert and you're more, sort of well established, and they like, people tend to give a little bit less room for mistakes when you're in that position. So I think it was actually a good thing that happened back then.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, it's good to fail, and we should encourage failing, because it is, like in board games or video games, the failing part where you learn the most. But it's just about failing quickly, I guess. And so, yeah, since then, I mean, we did work on another idea called Step Bet, which was in the pedometer space, which involved creating step challenges with friends and then making bets on who would win with virtual coins. And what was interesting was, for this one, rather than building anything, we instead created a really quick prototype using Slack to create and send challenges to people, and then using a Google spreadsheet to keep track of the winnings. And we worked out that, after a week, that the mechanics of the game were just not going to work. So we scrapped it. But it only took us a week this time to build a prototype. So that worked out really, really well.
Big lesson, big lesson learned for the future. Mm-hmm. And now you're instead of investing a year, you invest a week or two, maybe a month. And
that's right.
You don't feel that time was really wasted. So very good stuff.
Yeah. And this is the thing with games, and this is something I teach the game students as well, is that you can have lots of ideas, but until you put it into someone's hands, you don't know if it's going to work or not. And so, yeah, you need to reduce the amount of time between idea and prototype, or game prototype or game-based solution prototype, so you can just get that feedback as soon as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And this applies to so many fields as well, right? Like this applies definitely to in general entrepreneurship. The faster you get out there and are able to test out your solution as an early entrepreneur, as an innovator in your well-established industry, whatever that looks like. I think in business, I think this is crucial, as much as you can test it early. And it's really, really hard to get into the heads and into the systems of larger, well-established corporations and so on. But it's just as crucial, if not more, to them than to anybody else, I think. So I think the mentality is huge. But then to almost anything in design, right? Like you're designing something, and unless you test it, you don't know. You have no clue if that's going to work or it's going to,
That's right.
fall down to the bottom of the ocean.
That's right. You have all these assumptions, right? So, but yeah, until you get the data to tell you if those assumptions are correct or not, it's really interesting. Usually, it takes some time, and your intuition will develop and get better over time the more you design these things. But yeah, you never know. So it's so important to test out your ideas.
Yeah, you get more sensitized to your users and to the kind of thing that you're building. That's for sure. Like when I'm doing workshops and etc., it's true that I do like a little bit of critique, and I say, consider this, consider that, from general case knowledge that you tend to have. But then, it's always like, I think this, I think that, but always, go back and test it. Go back and see if what I'm saying makes sense. Like, doesn't mean that because I say it, it's going to be absolutely right and your user's going to love it, because I'm not your user, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So it's always with them, it's the user. It's that's the person who's going to guide you. And I was talking the other day, I'm trying to remember where it was, about, the whole, talking to your avatar kind of thing, like, what would my avatar say? What would my avatar think? And that mentality is very useful to keep your decision making moving forward, as long as you would test those assumptions, right? You say, well, I think my user would go this way. I think they would like this because of this and that, and then you go out and test it and see whether that made sense or not.
Yep. No, I agree. It's so important.
It's sort of a pre-testing. But of course, it's always, the most valuable input that you get is
Yeah.
from the actual people doing the things. And that's, I don't know what's your experience with that, Zach? Like, I always like to distinguish from what users give us as sort of verbal or even written feedback
Mm.
versus or see if it lines up or not what they actually do. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is a really good point, and this ties into kind of the research side of things as well. You want to gather as many data points as possible, and the way in which you run play tests, it can be really hard because people might act differently in front of you. It's they might not be using or playing the game in an environment they're comfortable with. But yeah, essentially, you know, the techniques we use a lot are sitting down, observing, getting people to think aloud their thoughts, which can be interesting because you really want to get inside their heads, right? But it's so hard to because obviously we're not mind readers. But then seeing what they do on the screen, so observing not just the screen themselves, but also their faces and the reactions they're having, interviewing them after. Yeah, there's a range of different techniques for testing out and getting data. The more you can do, the better, and the more comfortable, I guess, the user is, the better as well.
Have you and here I'm gonna sort of pinch you a little bit further. Have you had people who actually contradict themselves? Like, and what I mean by this is they say they didn't like this, but you saw nothing on their behavior that actually led you there. And if you have, how do you decide what is the best feedback?
Yeah, totally. It's really important not to ask leading questions as well. Like, did you think this was good? Or you could just be really careful in the way that you ask questions as well. So, yeah, you can get, certain responses that you may not be expecting or that differ from the kind of data. Yeah, I guess it's more just, it's a numbers game then as well. So, you want to test with as many people as possible. It can be hard recruiting, but yeah, more numbers help for any kind of research that you're doing.
Amazing. That's good advice as well. When you can, the like, I completely agree. The only caveat I have to that, and this happened, and I'm saying this because it's just happened with my design students in a master's I teach at, and they just graduated, is that they're, let's say, interviewing 5 people or 10 people, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is good to have more people than 1 or 2, especially, you have an iteration and you test with 5 to 10 people. You have an iteration, a test with other 5 to 10 is better than 1 to 2, right? That's it's a numbers game in that sense for sure. But having 5 to 10 does not mean that you can say, 8 out of 10 said this, so this is the right thing. It's like, be careful, right? The statistics are not significant there. You're definitely not picking a random group of people necessarily, or it's not random
That's
enough.
right.
So it's always, my only sort of look out for, and this is probably the quantitative methods professor back from 5 years ago in me is saying, be careful because that's not statistically significant.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. But of course, the more that you have, the more opinions you'll get and the more insights you might get from those people.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, Zach. So that there's been plenty of advice, a lot of insights from what you've been doing here. I don't know if there's anything you want to wrap the interview with before we make you, of course, the random question from the audience.
Oh, yes, the random question. That's right. We can jump into some quick questions.
Of course. Here it is. So it comes from the audience and they're asking, do you dive in and to try to solve a big and super impactful problem, or do you prefer to break it down and make small impacts on several projects? And of course, I'm guessing if it's your preference, which of these, and of course why you would be preferring one or the other.
Yeah, so definitely breaking it down and making small changes, I guess. It's just much easier. And the more small changes you do over time, the more it builds up and it leads to greater change, I guess. For example, if you're jumping in and trying to change the entire culture of an organization or workplace, that's a huge problem to tackle. But if you can narrow it down and just focus on something small, so it could be just making sure people turn up to meetings on time, that can have a huge impact just in that little area. And then you can make it's easier to design for smaller behaviors, or to design for smaller contexts, I guess. And then you can keep doing more and more of those, and they stack up and then have a greater influence over time. So yeah, I'll take a big goal. If someone comes to me, they're like, "Oh, we need to fix the entire course for this subject," and drill down, work out, some smaller problems, some very measurable problems as well, because it's super important to make sure you have a behavior that you're trying to change that is measurable, so you can see the impact that it has with your intervention. Yeah, and then understand what are the current barriers that are getting in the way, and then look in and designing a solution as well. So yeah, I think focusing on something small will then lead to bigger change if you keep building up over time, I guess.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that. And Zac, again, thank you so much for being with us again, for showing all your insights, all your knowledge. Can you tell us where we can find out more about you on the world of the internet, or where people can connect with you or ask you more questions, or whatever that looks like for you, before we say it's game over?
Yeah, totally. So my website, zacfitzwalter.com, ZACFITZWALTER.com. We can put a link in the show notes. Maybe it's a weird last name. But if people jump on there, there's a free book about gamification, or sign up to hear about my upcoming workshops for educators. You can also email me through the contact form. I love hearing what everyone is up to. And if you have any questions about games and board games and education, get in touch. Send me an email.
Amazing. Thank you so much once again, Zac. However, engagers, Zac, at least for now and for today, it is time to say that it's game over.
Thanks, Rob.
Hey, engagers, thank you for listening to the Professor Game Podcast. And look at where you're listening to this podcast. If it is through a mobile podcasting app, like on your phone, or even any podcasting app like Apple Podcasts or any of those, have you followed? Have you rated this podcast? Those are for absolute free, and I'm going to ask you to please do so, because that way we can reach more engagers like you to achieve our mission of making learning amazing. I have instructions for a few of those if you go to professorgame.com/iTunes. And if you enjoy this interview, if you want to find out about the show notes, you can find them at professorgame.com. Type Zac, Z-A-C, and you will find the show notes for this episode and the previous episode from 5 years ago. And remember, before you go on to your next mission, remember to subscribe or follow using your favorite podcast app and listen to the next episode of Professor Game. See you there.